Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie Uruchima. I am Kichwa Cañari from the Tele community in Cañar. And we are here in the Indigenous Media Zone representing Kichwa Hatari and other folks from the Kichwa diaspora. Kichwa Hatari is a New York-based collective of artists, activists, organizers that organize basically to visibilize our community, organize our community, create spaces where our stories, our narratives are used for our own empowerment purposes. And yeah, we work from where we are as like youth. And I'm going to ask each of my panelists here to introduce themselves, and then we're going to explain a little bit more about Kichwa Hatari, our process, and what we're doing here at the UN. So I'm going to pass it off, like introduce yourself, who you are, and what brought you here to the UN. So, should I start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for this space that has been created for us. And then I'm very happy that also we're taking this space for us to voice our perspectives and our experiences here in the US as youth that grew up here. My name is Tatiana Sarango. I'm from the Ecuadorian community in Saraguro. I was born there, and then I moved here when I was 14 years old. And when I moved here, I think there was a limitation on how to identify myself because I grew up in an indigenous community. So I always knew that I was indigenous until I moved here, and they were telling me to identify it as Latinx or Hispanics. And for me, it was like, I cannot do it because it meant that I wouldn't be wearing my regalia in a professional way, for example, for school or for formal events. I was supposed to wear a dress, like a Western dress. And at first, I felt not empowered. I felt like I was leaving something behind. And when you're 14, you're also finding your identity, your own identity. And I already had an identity before when back in Ecuador as indigenous. And I think I went through a little bit of a process of like with my family as well. They always wanted to keep our like regalias, our traditional clothes and culture. And then we found a way to get it from a family context to a community context, to be together, to share our culture, to share our tradition, to share our like ways of living here in the diaspora, where everything, well, like in the U.S. specifically, where everything is like individualized. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and yeah, that's my story about.
Hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here and share space with each and every one of you. My name is Adina Farinango. I am Kichwa Otavalo from the northern part of Ecuador, specifically the Imbabura region. And, well, I guess a little bit about myself is that I was born and raised here, and so I come from, my mom migrated, I believe, in like the 90s, and for many of the reasons that people are forced to migrate, like land displaced, it's not like voluntary migration. Most of the time it's forced because there's like many structures that don't allow you to, I guess, advance or like, you know, like survive in your own territory. So you're forced to like go to a new place and call it your home. And for me, so I was born and raised here, and I come from this community, Kichwa Otavalo, who are, like, we're known to be Mindalaes, who travel to different parts of the world. And, you know, I find it so inspiring, but also very, brave? Brave to go to a whole new territory, learning the language, learning the culture. And for me, as, like, I guess a second generation being here, it's finding how to call these lands our homelands, and how do we have our memory of like who we are and our identity, and how do we bring it here, and how can we like continue the culture from wherever place in the world that we are. Because like culture is not static. Culture is like a spiral, and here we've had our own processes, and we've redefined in a way of how we identify and how we, I guess, continue the culture for the next generations. And for me, it's been through art making. I am an I usually I identified as an illustrator, but now I I think I'm gonna say I'm multidisciplinary because I dabble in a little bit of everything. And for me, it's been a way to just channel all these questions about either my identity or how do I empower myself, being a Kichwa Warmi, Kichwa Tabalo woman in these territories, and how does that look for me? So I might have spoken for too long, so I'll just hand off the mic to my sister.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. And thank you, Charlie, for bringing us all here together in this room. My name is Carolina, and we're sisters, so we share the same origin story. Our family migrated here into the U.S., so I was also born here in the U.S., and I find myself here in the UN today because I'm exposed to like a diasporic community that we have here in New York, in specifically through Kichwa Hatari, who really is a space for and is making space for individuals like us, Kichwa diasporic individuals, to speak on issues that are not issues, but on topics that have very much to do with us, and yet it seems that a lot of other people answer questions like these for us, and they don't really come from our own mouths. So I find that being here in the UN, speaking on questions that I ask myself and that we ask ourselves constantly in conversations privately with each other, that I think are really are really something that needs to be heard in order for our communities to just resist against invisibilization and to continue to actively use our voices. So that is just a little bit about me, and I think I'll hand it back to Charlie.
Thank you, Carolina. And thank you all for introducing yourselves. You all have mentioned a couple of things I want to touch on. Before then, also expand a little bit more on Kichwa Hatari, who we are. We're a New York-based collective, audiovisual collective of organizers, activists, and media makers who have been in this space in New York, working from where we are for the past almost 10 years, since 2014. Really have been, trying to empower our communities through these spaces, right? It's important for us to be in spaces like these to interject our own narratives because, we are displaced peoples at the end of the day. Our parents have been displaced peoples. My parents were displaced also like more than 30 years ago from their communities out of necessity. And so that's where like indigenous migration happens, and that's the reality that has bonded us all. And Kichwa Hatari works from that, right? Works from that root, works from that narrative, and we create from it, right? We create from it, we are active from it, and we resist from it, still resisting colonization, still resisting capitalism, trying to find our own spaces, our own organizations, our own collectives, and empowering each other, because at the end of the day, we need each other. And to that, and to the point that a lot of you also mentioned, like working from the Kichwa diaspora, right? So I was wondering if y'all can talk a little bit about like what does it mean to work from a Kichwa diaspora? What does Kichwa diaspora mean to you all? Anybody want to take that?
Well, I think for me, being Kichwa and diaspora, it means a force and bravery, and to keep my identity and my community always with me in whatever space I'm taking. So just trying to provide and create space. I think we have worked also. I was here based in New York, and then I moved to Madison, Wisconsin, where I also found another community, well, the Kichwa Hatari community, and we just decided to create a space for them to be visibilized, that our narratives are visibilized within the migration context. So we did a library takeover event, just trying to create a space for our own families, because they have been here since what, the 1980s, 1990s, and I think for me it means like to open space to always have my community and my cultural identity with me and whatever I'm doing. Basically, I'm just like looking our own needs and trying to create our own solutions based on our wisdom and knowledge that we gather from our like parents. Because that's like at the end of the day, since we're being invisibilized, our narratives and our perspectives are never taken into consideration. We have people that talk for us. We have people who are trying to do policy for us. But at the end of the day, it doesn't include us, because we usually just categorize as Latinx or Hispanics, and we never are on the conversations about migration. So I think for me that's what it means to be like a Quechua in the diaspora. And yeah, so that's basically how like I feel about it.
I guess for me, what it means to be Quechua in the diaspora means, I guess, like really embracing your entire story, your entire lineage, what it took for you to be in the place where you are today, like honoring all, like, in a way, like the sacrifices that your parents made to get you where you are, whether by force or voluntary, most of the time force. But I think for me, being in the Quechua diaspora is also being aware that we have access to spaces like this, that we can speak on issues about from our own experience. And I think that's what usually lacks in institutions that are like the UN, or in any spaces. It's where most of the time people speak for us, or assume certain things, when it should be like coming directly from like the people impacted. So indigenous voices, frontline communities, like what is like some of the work that we're doing. And for me, being Quechua in the diaspora, I guess would be having like spaces like this, like with Kichwa Hatari. I found it very nurturing, because we see ourselves in each other, like we bond over our same experiences, and we've been able to have conversations that sometimes are lacking in other spaces, and it's just validating to have this space. And I think that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I want to echo what Adina and Tati mentioned. And I think also for being a Quechua in the diaspora, for me personally, and I'm sure people can agree, is also having grown up here and seeing how the discrimination or oppression that our parents went through in Ecuador also replicates itself here in the U.S., not just on us in different forms, but also against other people, Black Americans, Arab Americans. So I think having grown up with that history of our parents and this firsthand experience living here in the U.S., I think being in diaspora is, I think, something that we leverage as a little bit of a strength, that we can be very conscious of oppression that we see, not just here, but also back home. And I think, yeah, that I just wanted to mention that, but I also feel very strongly with, and relate very strongly with what Tati and Adina said.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, like, I, I think I want to echo what you were saying, Carolina, about, seeing the oppressions from both sides, right? Like, because I know we always have conversations about, what does it mean to be diasporic Kichwa? What does it mean to be in this position, right? And I think oftentimes, like y'all are also saying, like we're relegated as invisible almost. Like our voices aren't taken into account, and you can just see it by like how the narrative points to like our generation as like not being from here or from there, right? This like narrative, like not from here, not from there, but where we come from, it's like no, we're from here and there. Like we are from here, we're from both places, and like, we can see the oppressions from both sides. We can see how like, the same systems that are like marginalizing peoples here, Black and Indigenous populations, communities here in the U.S. are also the same forces that are doing this, that are going into our communities still today, and are expanding, right, and imposing violence on other communities, other Indigenous communities, and yeah, I think that's very powerful. Like that, being in a diaspora, like also gives us that lens, right? So thanks for that. Next question I wanted to ask is, how have you felt in a society where uh, our Quechua indigenous cultures are not recognized and we're categorized oftentimes as just Latinos or Hispanics? And how have you handled the differences between Latinidad and being indigenous in the spaces that you occupy? Yeah.
I think I mentioned this at the beginning that it has been a process for me. First, as completely identifying myself as Indigenous, and then moving here and being in the spaces where my identity was not recognized. For example, at school, when I went to school, like college, when I went to college and finished off, I never, and I think also we were kind of the first people who were going to college, first like generation going to college, and I never saw myself onto other like people's experiences, and so yeah, so it's been a process for me to first learn and relearn myself and my culture, um, and I wanted to say something else. Yeah, and also creating the spaces for like my sister who's 7 years old, and like to her to have her own voice, and that she never question who she is. She never has to question. She never well, she will have her own experiences, but I feel I want to create a platform or that space for her to not question her identity and to be sure of like who she is, to give her the tools and equipments for her, even though she's going to have her own experiences. And I want that for other like younger generations and younger people who are growing up here. So yeah, it's been a process of learning and relearning, and yeah, also I think there kind of like a lot of damage with me trying to fit into a this like Hispanic or Latinx that I never felt identified with. So kind of not being too harsh with myself, of going through questioning myself, and then just providing me space to maybe fail, but at the same time relearn. Yeah, so it's a process, I think.
I actually really like this question. And again, echoing what Tati said, but also I wanted to kind of touch on the fact that for me, at least growing up, and I still actually don't, but yes, so I actually don't like that label Latin or Hispanic on me, because it is it's a colonized label, label of colonization or whatever. But I always understood that I grew up in a completely different culture. I'm not Latina or Latinx. I didn't really grow up with a lot of the culture that people who identify as Latinx kind of grow up with. At home, we kind of eat different foods. We listen to different music and also even eat different food. Very much more of our community, of where we're from. So that's a little bit of how I really like this question because it's one of the easiest questions for me to answer. Is that I do not feel identified in that label. And yeah, I don't know. That was pretty much it.
Okay. Well, the question was how, how? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. How you felt in a society where indigenous culture is oftentimes reduced to just being, well, at least when you migrate here, like when we're
Yeah.
displaced, like we're reduced to just being Latinx
Right.
or Hispanic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, echoing what everyone is saying, I think as indigenous communities, yeah, we're invisibilized in many spaces, in academia, in in every single space that you could think of. We're invisibilized because there hasn't been indigenous people at the table. And as coming from a community, we bring knowledge, we bring our own way of thinking, our own cosmovision, our own way of doing things. So when you reduce people to this label of indigenous, I'm sorry, when you reduce people to just this label of just Hispanic or just Latino, you're just generalizing everyone into one group. So even for me, sometimes I don't even like saying just indigenous, oh, where are you from? I'm indigenous. No, I'm Kichwa, and I come from this line of people. This is my lineage. This is who I am. This is part of my culture. This is my music. And there comes so much power from just embracing who you are completely, because you're honoring everyone that came before you. So for me, it's been, I think there's some work that has been done. At least I grew up here in New York too, and in school you're forced to fill out these forms, or are you Hispanic? Yes, no. Are you of, they give you these labels, and what do you do when you don't know which one to circle? And I've always filled out Native American, but then there's this other question where it's Native American, and then they only mean the northern people of this continent. So it's okay, but there's indigenous people in different parts of the world, and we have our own culture as well. So how do we keep speaking about who we are to visibilize not only ourselves but all of the issues that impact us as a community, not only here in this territory but back in our homelands. So I think that's all I gotta say.
Right, and then just as one more follow up, and then we're gonna switch to other guests that we have. How can we redefine this concept of indigenous migration within the diaspora? And in what ways have we transformed it into a narrative of empowerment? Or what ways have you transformed it into a narrative of empowerment, either by how you do things, or how you see things, or how you show up to things? Yeah.
I think just spaces like this one, we've empowered ourselves with each other, as having this collective where each and every one of our voices is validated, whether it's through the arts, whether it's through photography, whether it's through journalism. We're speaking up about our experiences. We're empowering ourselves with our own narrative, and I feel with the hopes that we're inspiring other indigenous youth, other Kichwa youth to see themselves in this work, or felt empower them so that they can empower themselves, so that they can use their own voice and speak on their own. Yeah. Or any last thoughts, I guess.
Yeah, so I think I wanted to think it as a way of also empowering myself, but I I kind of feel a lot of responsibility with the new generation. As I mentioned, I have a 7-year-old sister who's also growing up here between like two worlds, between like navigating all of the, and like her experiences are super different. And as Adina said, like we just want hopefully them seeing us in different spaces, seeing us conquer different platforms, always been embracing like our identity. Hopefully, she and the next generation will also feel like empowered. So yeah, I think I do this for myself and for my sisters, for my sister, and for all of like the new generations that are coming and are growing up away from our communities, away from our territories back in Ecuador. And sometimes we question ourselves, how are we doing? But like always going back to embracing our identities and to always have it on the back of our heads on whatever work we do, because all of the work that we're doing is having an impact on our communities, and our communities will always have our backs. They're always, but as if we do consultation, because I feel like I always, whatever work I'm doing, because I also work in research and academia, and like I try to voice their perspectives and to have as much consultation that as que yo pueda, as I can, yeah, as much consultation, because the work is collective. The platforms and the spaces that I'm always thinking are collective and are for the community. And yeah, so I always empower like community spaces made by my own to our own, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thoughts, I think, and we do it for the future, like Tati said, but I think we also do it for our ancestors who had, probably all of them had very difficult like early life experiences and life experiences, and when we find ourselves here, it's almost like we're compared to what they had, it's very much an easy life, but not very easy, but compared to what they went through. And so I think it's something really empowering to think that where we come from people who were able to get through those kinds of experiences and have families, move across a continent and create communities in places where they knew no one and had nothing. And they did this all over the world, and here in New York is just one of the many places that they did that. And so I sometimes feel like I can, like I feel my community dispersed across the entire world, and it's very empowering to think that way, and supportive, nurturing. But that's pretty much what I had to say. And thank you so much, Charlie, for these really great questions.
Thank you all for joining this part of the panel. This is a really fruitful conversation, and I think seeing all the perspectives, right, like when we talk about Kichwa diaspora, also reminding ourselves that it's not a homogenous experience either, right? Just like being indigenous is not a homogenous experience, being Kichwa is not a homogenous experience, neither is being from the Kichwa diaspora, right? We connect, we connect from that level, right? But we all also have our own experiences, and I think it's important to also keep that in mind for future generations. And yeah, and I think that's what we do, right? From where we are, like from different perspectives, from like academia, from art, from activism, from all these like different roles. So thank you all for joining. And we're gonna now do a little switch up. We're gonna have other folks, a fresh panel of participants here. So thank you. We'll clap.